People's Radio United.
That would hold a hatchet, just a sheath, and a green button that looked like it came, that everybody would say came from a prison jacket. These are on the floor of this bedroom in plain view, that anybody who'd gone in the house the day before would have seen and would have, said, "My God, what's this?" But they didn't see him. So later on, and this is just one indication of how corrupt and evil, in the sense of framing Kevin, it turned out to be. The cop that went into that room, he swore he did not. He said, "Oh, I forgot to go into that room. I just never bothered to check that room. That's why I didn't see the sheath and the button." Well, the sheriff's office sent over a fingerprint team to do that house. Once they, that's how they found out Kevin had been there. It was this fingerprint team. And one of the things the fingerprint team found was that this cop's fingerprints were on the closet door where Kevin had slept, inside and out this door. And right below, like at his feet, would have been the sheath and the button. So here's a guy who's swearing in court that he never went in that room, and then here's the fingerprint report that was turned over to the defense that says, "Oh yeah, he was in the room all right. Here, his fingerprints are on the door." Both sides. So that's one example. But anyway, this sheath became the number one thing that Kevin couldn't wiggle out of. There was talk that, now everybody knows the Ryans, everybody was partially killed with a hatchet. And in this vacant house, I keep saying it's a vacant house. They call it the lease house. The guy's name was Larry Lease. So I'll start talking about it as the Lease house. So Larry Lease and his wife kept a hatchet. They weren't exactly sure where they was. See, this is June. You have a hatchet around for chopping wood in the winter when it gets colder up there. So this is June, and the wife says, "Well, I think I left it in the, like a drawer out in the kitchen." And Larry Lease said, "No, I left it right over by the mantelpiece. That's where it was." And then he wasn't so sure that the hatchet they found was his at first, but then pretty soon he was pretty sure it was his hatchet. So this became I guess the hardest thing for anybody to believe. Now, that here's the room that Kevin slept in with a sheath in it, and the house with the hatchet that was used to kill the Ryans. This is what the jury heard. The green button was also incriminating, but the damnedest thing about the green button was Kevin, while he was at Chino, only had a brown prison jacket, and brown prison jackets only have brown buttons. And then, but Kevin couldn't prove this, but the day he escaped, the night before, he had out of the TV room or the common room, a newly arrived inmate had like a real sharp black leather jacket with no buttons on it, just a zipper, and Kevin stole that. And he didn't walk away, and he didn't want to walk away looking like a convict. So he walks away in this black leather jacket that doesn't say CIM on the back, like all the browns and the green ones say CIM. So he's walking down the street, he's just a black guy walking down the street in a black leather jacket. But anyway, they tried to make this green button like this was really incriminating to Kevin when it was so far-fetched it was a joke. But the sheath is what really got him. I remember one of the jurors, years later, they went and this new investigators that started working for Kevin, they interviewed one of the jurors and said, that I couldn't believe that, I couldn't get over it was just, this couldn't have been a coincidence that the hatchet used to kill the Ryans was from the Lee's house. It's too hard to believe that in this little period of time, from the time Kevin left at 8:30 and started hitchhiking down to Mexico, that some other person would go to the Lee's house, steal the hatchet, then go up to the Ryan's house and commit these murders. And I agree. That's highly unlikely. And when the judge sentenced Kevin to life, to death. I mean, when the jury sentenced him to death and the judge agreed with that, he said that coincidence, he just couldn't get over it. He had no doubt in his mind that Kevin was the murderer because of that hatchet coming from the Lee's house. So that was one of the things, and then they planted other stuff on Kevin they inculpated him. They just, instead of using all this information they had to exclude him from the deal, they started making up things to bring him into it, to tie him to it so he couldn't get out of it.
Last time we talked about the cigarette butts they found that actually grew in evidence. And there's a lot of crazy stuff.
A lot of bad stuff. They found some. They wanted to tie Kevin to some tobacco. They wanted to prove that Kevin had stolen that station wagon. So they had to put some stuff. Well, they found the station wagon. This was the most sought after station wagon in California history, but they finally found it like a week later. At least a week later, down in what the hell was it? Oh, Long Beach, California, 45 miles, the other direction, north of San Bernardino. Kevin goes south to get to Mexico. Well, this station wagon goes north to Long Beach, and it's left in a church parking lot, Catholic church parking lot. And then a guy walking his dog through there one morning, he sees the most wanted station wagon in California, and he calls up the cops and tells them about it.
Long Beach is south of Chino Hills.
Well, 45 miles, but it's the other. It's the other direction from. It's the other direction from Mexico.
No, if you're going from Chino Hills, that is on the. I mean, you could get there if you made a pit stop in Long Beach.
You could, huh?
Yeah, I mean it's coming back west and then going south. I'm just clarifying that because I used to live in Pomona and I right by Chino Hills, and now I live kind of close to Long Beach. So it is the same direction, but that doesn't prove anything. I'm just clarifying that if somebody
okay. All right, I thought it was north. Okay, when they find this, when the police come over there to the parking lot, they see fingerprints on the back. The car's really dusty, but there's fingerprints on the trunk that are fresh. Smudges on the trunk where somebody had just opened it and closed it. This is like, Kevin's been in Tijuana and Ensenada since the 6th of June, and this is the 11th or so of June. A number of days afterwards, and yet somebody had the keys to that vehicle, and the keys are not in the vehicle. Somebody had the keys to that vehicle and had recently opened the back trunk and shut it. So that was one thing. Then they did an inventory right then and there of that car. They noted everything in it. That preliminary report, wrote it down. The deputy signed it. Then they took it to an impound lot. They did a much more thorough inventory of the car, and they wrote down everything. Neither of these reports referred to any tobacco, any loose tobacco in the vehicle. They did find a Viceroy. Kevin smoked Cools. And if you smoke Cools, menthol cigarettes, you don't go around smoking non-menthol cigarettes. But But anyway, now, a few days later, an undated, unsigned report lists loose tobacco in the vehicle. and they were saying that it's the kind of tobacco that is issued in bulk in prisons, and at the California Institute, that institution for men, that kind of thing, Institute for Men. That's the kind of tobacco that they do. The fact was, though, that Doug Ryan was a pipe smoker, and I'm a pipe smoker, and I'll tell you this: if you smoke a pipe, you get tobacco all over the damn car. And that's probably, if they did actually find tobacco, that's probably what it was. Their experts couldn't say it was actually the kind of tobacco that's called roll-right that they gave it at the prison. They just said it was similar to. When they say similar to, that just means they don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't prove it. But then they came up with this to help themselves. They just couldn't stop once they got on this track. When Kevin was arrested for the 2 burglaries that put him in, got him a 4-year sentence and put him in in the California prison there at Chino. They impounded his car and just left it in a police lot. And at the end of the 4 years, I guess he could either claim it or maybe not. I don't know. But anyway, they went over there. I think they went over there and removed from his ashtray some butts that had this. You roll your own tobacco, those kind of butts. Whether you do your own deal, and they brought those in and they put those in the station wagon of in the station wagon now, and they said there's now these butts in there too. These roll-right butts. But since so I mean that's dirty pull, to say the least, to do that kind of thing. And then to mess around with Kevin's blood, there was this one tiny drop of blood that was nowhere near the scene of this crime. It was down the hallway, almost like a foot from the living room. This tiny spot of blood is no bigger than it's not the size of a penny, half the size of a penny. At the base of this wall, like 3 or 4 inches above the rug, that they were able to turn in to be a match for Kevin's blood. So they had this one drop that they said was his, and years later, they found out when they were testing something else that when the day after they arrested Kevin, they took a vial of blood from him. They had this one drop of blood and they wanted to compare it, that kind of thing. And they took this vial of blood from Kevin, and to stop it from coagulating, getting thick, they put in this substance called EDTA that keeps the blood thin in a vial. It'll last for years that way. So they got this one little vial, and years later, when like 2006, this lab they sent a swath of something off with Kevin's blood on it, and the lab detected. They pulled out the blood on this swath, and they saw Kevin's blood, and they said at least the DNA of another or more people are on this swath. So what happened was they kept, out of this vial of blood of Kevin's, they would take some out every now and then they didn't want it to look like they were taking it out, so they put in somebody else's blood to fill it back up. So when this lab got it, there's at least another person's blood in the same vial. So that was another egregious example of this frame job they did on Kevin.
It's horrible.
They started off the case, the actual court case. The first piece of evidence they had that they exhibited to the jury was this allegation that Kevin had escaped in a tennis shoe called a Pro Keds dude. that had a distinctive diamond pattern. Well, Kevin, he escaped in PF flyers that have no distinctive pattern. They were so worn out that when he was going up that hill, all he could do was fall down. Just keep slipping. But anyway, they alleged that these pro-ked dudes they're made by this company called Stride Rite, and they were only available to institutions, i.e. prisons. The state of California had a contract with them because they were an institution, and that these were a special shoe just for prisoners, prisoners and maybe military or something like that, but mainly people in prisons. And so the implication being that if you could find a pro-ked dude pattern in the Ryan's house, then you'd have your man. How many? I mean, there was only one prisoner escaped, and only one guy lived down in that lease house, so that would be it. So they start the case off by having this Stride Rite guy come on and say, we only make these for institutions. When the warden of the penitentiary, the Chino Penitentiary, read in the newspaper that they were going to be using these pro-ked dudes in this way, she called up the head detective and talked to either him or his number one assistant and said, I've done some checking, sir. These pro-ked dudes are not made for institutions. They're available commercially. You can buy them Sears stores, Kmart's. They're big sellers on the East Coast. And out here in California and the West Coast, you can buy them through catalogs. Anybody can buy them. And they're not made special for prisoners. Well, that didn't deter the prosecution from saying exactly that they were made special for prisons. And then, so this lab, this crime lab, that's run, these are deputy sheriff's guys running this crime lab. They go out to Chino and they get 2 or 3 pair of pro-ked dudes that are around Kevin's size. And they go back. One of the things they bagged was the sheet off of Peggy and Doug Ryan's waterbed. They put this in a bag and they got it back to the lab. They were able now. They hadn't seen this before. They admitted they didn't notice this before. But by God, there was a diamond-shaped tennis shoe pattern on the sheet.
Of course there was.
And another thing they saw, that on top of the jacuzzi lid, there was a diamond-shaped tennis shoe pattern on the jacuzzi right outside the master bedroom. So earlier, though, other people had gone through the jacuzzi's right on the patio outside the master bedroom. I mean, it's like 3 feet from. You could step out of the bathroom, the master bedroom, right into the jacuzzi. Very handy. People had been, as I said, 70 people had been in and out of that house, and nobody had seen nobody had seen one. And one of the people, like a crime scene investigator, went around and made notes, and this would happen to be a woman. She didn't see any footprint on a jacuzzi. It's something she would have noted, a big red flag if she'd have seen that. But by God, there's now this diamond pattern deal on there. So that's how they started this case off. That here's a guy that escapes from prison and pro-ked dudes, and by God, these pro-ked dudes are on the sheet, the bed sheet of the Ryans, and on their jacuzzi outside. So what do you think? He's the only prisoner that escaped. That's the way they started this thing off. They had to be known. I mean, they know that the warden called them up and told them they were wrong, and it didn't stop them.
Yeah, they really wanted a conviction. It's ridiculous.